Hey guys, this video is going to be over DNA, the structure of DNA, and we're going to look at the parts that make up DNA. We're going to identify the parts, the small parts. We're going to look at the structure. We're going to label a couple of pictures. So let's get started. Okay, DNA, like we know or from class, is the blueprint of life, and we call it the blueprint of life because it has all the instructions that our cells need or our bodies need in order to repair themselves or just to grow and develop into what we are today. Okay, just like a blueprint for a house, the blueprint has the instructions for that building, for the house. Well, our DNA has the instructions for our bodies or for whatever organism we're looking at. Okay, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, and the deoxyribo part. Okay, this right here is the name of the sugar that's actually in DNA, and the nucleic acid part comes from the biomolecule, the type of biomolecule that it is. So DNA is a nucleic acid, okay, and it has the sugar deoxyribose, so we call it deoxyribonucleic acid, which stands for DNA. Okay. Now the structure was established by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. Okay, they compiled a bunch of research that they had seen, and also some pictures from Miss Franklin, Rosalind Franklin, that she took through X-rays in 1952, and they were able to make the structure that we know as DNA today. They were able to use different or bond all the molecules that are found in DNA and make the structure that we know today as a double helix, right? Double-stranded double helix. So they're the ones that have the credit for the structure, and they were able to synthesize the structure back in 1953. Okay, DNA we know is a double helix, double-stranded, double strands of or two strands of nucleotides. Remember, nucleotides are the monomers of nucleic acid, so it's a double helix. You can see it here. Okay, on the right. Okay, it's anti-parallel, meaning two. You know that two parallel lines are actually they never touch each other, right? So if these two arrows are parallel to each other, they're going the same direction. They never touch each other. That's parallel. Anti-parallel is actually the same two arrows, but one going up, one going down. They're parallel, but they're not going in the same direction, so we call that anti-parallel. So you can see that from the structure of DNA, and we'll go into more detail once we start labeling our picture. Okay, DNA is located inside the nucleus. In prokaryotes, remember that DNA is located in the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, it's not in the nucleus because bacteria doesn't have any nucleus. DNA is also the universal genetic code. Everything that's living, that we consider living, that has grays, remember, grows, reproduces, adapts, has cells, and uses energy, okay, has DNA, and is the molecule that carries all of its genetic information, and that's the reason we call it universal. Okay, now, like we said earlier, DNA is made up of nucleotides. Okay, and these are the monomers of nucleic acid. So DNA is made up of nucleotides, and these nucleotides have three different parts. The first part is a phosphate group. Okay, and that's that circle there, the silver circle. The second part is a pentose sugar, or the deoxyribose. That's where the name comes from. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, and then the third part is the nitrogen base. Okay, and nitrogen bases could be A, T, C, or G: adenine, thymine, guanine, or cytosine. So there's four options on what nitrogen base can be used for that nucleotide. So you can have four types of nucleotides. Okay, the thing that never changes in a nucleotide is the phosphate and the sugar. Okay, but the nitrogen base, you can have one of those four nitrogen bases connected to the sugar. Okay, so that's our nucleotide. A bunch of these put together make up DNA. Okay, they make up the genetic code of every living organism. Now, nitrogen bases, we already said that there's four: A, T, C, or G. Okay, there's some that are called pyrimidines, and these are the ones that are made up of one ring. You can see it here. Okay, they make a kind of like a ring here, right? Remember when we looked at carbohydrates and we said those were rings? Well, these are rings. They're made up of one ring. That's C and T, or cytosine and thymine. Those are pyrimidines. We also have the other two, which are purines. Okay, And purines are your A and G, and these ones have two rings. Look at the pictures on there, and you can see that there's two rings in this ones and only one in this up here. Now you see one that we didn't mention, or that I didn't mention earlier, is the uracil, or U. That one's only in RNA, and when we get to protein synthesis, or in the video of protein synthesis, we'll talk more about the uracil nitrogen base. Okay. All right. Now base pairing rules. Okay. DNA is always held together or bonded together. The two strands are bonded together by hydrogen bonds. They're very weak bonds, so that when they go through DNA replication, okay, the two strands can separate and make copies of each other. Okay. If you don't remember about DNA replication, watch the video over DNA replication so you can get familiarized with that. But the DNA, the hydrogen bonds are actually separated by an enzyme called DNA helicase. Once they do that, then new nucleotides can be attached, but they always follow the base pair rule. G always bonds with a C, A always bonds with a T. Okay, G and C always have three hydrogen bonds, and you can see them right here, right? And A and T always have two nitrogen bonds, and you can see them right there on the screen. All right, so again, to summarize, DNA is a double helix made up of nucleotides. Nucleotides are made up of three things: phosphate, sugars, and one of the nitrogen bases. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to actually label a picture of DNA and see and write down everything we've learned from it. Okay, so as you can see here, you have it's two molecules. One is showing you the actual rings of the nitrogen bases. The other one is just two strands going up and down. Okay, but we're going to start writing down some facts. We know DNA is more of a summary. Okay, DNA is a double helix. We know that. It's made up of subunits, and those subunits, remember, they're called nucleotides, right? And I'm circling two of those nucleotides here. You can see the phosphate, sugar, and then one of the nitrogen bases. Okay. Now, those nucleotides always follow the base pair ruling. Remember that A always bonds with a T, C always bonds with a G. A and T always have two hydrogen bonds. C and G always have three hydrogen bonds. Okay, so I'm just going ahead and put all the letters under just so you can see how they're always pairing up with each other. Okay, three bonds, two bonds. The next thing we're going to look at is the phosphate and deoxyribose backbone. Remember I told you that the phosphate and the sugar never change in those nitrogen bases. The only thing that changes is the phosphate and sugar never change in the nucleotides. The only thing that changes is the nitrogen base that attaches to the sugar. Okay, the backbone of this DNA molecule is the phosphate and the sugar. You can see there I have circle, pentagon, circle, pentagon, circle, pentagon. That never changes. Both outer parts of the DNA molecule are made up of phosphate and sugar. Okay, the only thing that changes is the center part, which are the nitrogen bases. That's actually what carries our genetic information, the nitrogen bases. Okay, we mentioned earlier that the strands were anti-parallel. Okay, and they're just like the arrow. Okay, what I'm going to add here, I'm going to add some arrowheads just to show you what I mean. Okay, just like that. Okay, the arrowheads are always pointing from 5' to 3', and they are going to be pointing opposite from each other. Okay, they're going to be parallel, but they're pointing opposite from each other. Now, the 5 and the 3 on here, the only thing they're telling us, or the only thing those numbers tell us, is the number that the phosphate, the number of carbon that the phosphate is attached to the sugar. We won't go into much detail on that, but just know that DNA always grows from the 5' to the 3' end of the strands. Okay, and I'm going to draw one here. You can see that goes from 5 to 3, right? And the other one goes from 5 to 3 as well. So they're both parallel. They're not touching each other, but they're going in opposite directions. Okay, now the last thing that we'll talk about, the last two things, is eukaryotics. Remember, they have their DNA in the nucleus, so this entire structure is in the nucleus. Prokaryotes, they have it where? You should know. Correct. It's in the cytoplasm. It's scattered all over the cytoplasm. And the last thing is that the DNA is the blueprint of living things. Okay, everything that's living uses DNA as their blueprint. I hope this helped. Okay, Go back and slow it down if you need to so you can look at the notes, but let me know if you need any help.